Football, also called soccer in some parts of the world, is the most popular, ubiquitous sport there is. Huge numbers of people play football because they've developed a passion for it and it's easy to get into. Most people can manage to kick a ball. The only continent without a football competition is Antarctica. The only countries who aren't officially represented are a handful of pinprick Pacific Island nations. Even the tiny city-states of Monaco and Vatican have football clubs. Nearly everyone understands football to some degree. Get the ball in the net, and don't use your arms unless you're the goalkeeper. When you watch people playing football, even if they're from a culture or part of the world that's completely unfamiliar to you, you can understand what's going on, what they're trying to achieve, how they react to events in the game, how they feel at particular moments. Since football is nearly universal, I'm going to try to use it as a metaphor for life in general. Here are some ways I think that life is like football. Way number one, winners and losers. Every match day, there is an equal number of winners and losers. The losers often feel a lot of frustration and sadness. Why do they all subject themselves to the risk of losing? With challenging competitive activities like football, everyone who participates improves, regardless of whether they win or lose. I believe that we intuitively understand this, and that's why we're willing to take the risk. By playing, we're also making our rivals improve. The more participants there are, and the harder they try, the greater the development of players and football overall. Lionel Messi is the star of the game. You may see him as a natural genius who was born for football greatness, but the reality is his achievements are the result of lifelong work and dedication, with support from teammates, coaches, clubs and administrations, and spurred on by strong rivals. He is the product of a globe-spanning system of millions of people working to improve themselves, and we all get to enjoy the outputs of the system in the form of magnificent football. The food industry is a lot like football. It's huge, people get very passionate about it, and it's also comparatively easy to get into. Most people have at least some basic cooking knowledge. Food businesses go bust all the time. Some people suffer a lot of heartache as a result, but many others figure out how to survive and thrive by serving food that customers want at a price they're willing to pay. And regardless of success, everyone involved learns and grows. Ultimately, the economy benefits from the sheer mass of people who are willing to start businesses that could fail. One result of all this economic activity is celebrity chefs with Michelin stars, the Lionel Messis of the restaurant world. But another far more important outcome is the wide availability of food that is better and more affordable than it would otherwise be. So glorious losers in football and life, I salute you. Our achievements would not be possible without you. Way number two, rules. This dynamic of mutual improvement in football only works when people follow the rules. When trying to win at anything, there is always the temptation to cheat. In football, a common way to cheat is to commit a foul and hope that the referee wasn't looking. More extreme examples of cheating might be unduly influencing the referee, having extra players, using prohibited equipment, or even sabotaging the opposing team in some way. The problem with cheating is it takes away the incentive to improve. Nobody spends hours practicing an elegant but illegal move. Cheating is always a shortcut to try and achieve results without putting in the effort. But it's not only the cheaters who stop improving when they cheat. it's also their rivals. Players who see opponents getting away with cheating will either lose motivation or start cheating themselves. This sets in motion a downward spiral where nobody is improving, affecting the quality of football overall. The same is true in many aspects of life, particularly in business. The methods of cheating may be different. Cartels, bribery, conflict of interest, misrepresentation of your financial position, or surreptitious non-compliance with regulations. But the outcome is the same. Cheaters don't need to try as hard, the cheated lose interest, and the economy and everyone affected by it suffers as a result. Even worse than cheaters are rules that actively limit our collective potential. Rules should always be designed to encourage our participation. The biggest example of a damaging rule in football was the 50-year ban on women that was imposed in many countries. Perhaps the highest profile example in wider society would be the rules that permitted slavery. Thankfully, these have been almost completely eliminated. Way number 3. When is too much? Some football clubs are poor, some are rich, and some are insanely rich. Rich clubs are generally more successful than poor clubs. Often the supporters of poor clubs will accuse the rich clubs of buying success. A rich club tends to be successful because they invest heavily across players, coaches, facilities, and their supporting organisations. This investment is a good thing because it lifts the club's performance and forces rivals to lift their performance in response. This competition causes football as a whole to improve, and the results will be seen in the on-field performances that we enjoy. Rich clubs could also further their own interests by lobbying football associations to make rules and decisions to favour them so they can succeed with less effort. Or they could seek to make exclusive arrangements that guarantee them wins and profits and shield them from competition. This kind of activity would not be beneficial for football. Similarly, in life, there are billionaires and non-billionaires. The non-billionaires accuse the billionaires of accumulating too much and depriving everyone else. They assert that nobody ever needs that much wealth. But some billionaires have amassed enormous wealth because they need it to achieve an extremely ambitious goal. For instance, flying a spaceship to Mars. Like rich football clubs, their efforts have the effect of lifting what humanity as a whole is capable of. Our ability to concentrate people and resources is one of the great strengths of our species that has made a major contribution to our success. However, there are also rich people who just want to sit on their wealth. Often the existing systems and rules allow them to maintain or increase their wealth with practically no effort. They often rely on having an entrenched position from which to thwart and stifle potential challengers who have fewer resources and less influence than them. For them, life has become all about maintaining their position and avoiding competition. People with this fortress mentality contribute so much less to the world than they could, and worse, they also limit what others are able to contribute. Ways that life is like football. Number 4. Near peers. The league structure is an interesting aspect of football. A round-robin competition where every team plays every other team is considered the truest test in sport. In England, there are around 40,000 football clubs, most of which have multiple teams. A round-robin competition consisting of just one team from each of these clubs would require 780 million games to be played. This is obviously utterly infeasible, so clubs are inevitably split into a large number of separate competitions called leagues. In the early days of football, these leagues were disconnected from each other. But as football became increasingly popular and the number of leagues grew, they began to come into competition with each other for clubs, players, and fan interest. The leagues responded to this risk to their viability by, firstly, creating opportunities for new teams to enter their leagues, typically by playing and defeating the last placed teams in their leagues, and secondly, by reaching agreements with other leagues around the rules for movement of clubs between leagues. Over time, these leagues have merged and ordered to become a single hierarchy, with the most prestigious league at the top for the best performers. At the end of each season, the top teams are promoted to the league above, and the bottom teams are relegated to a league below. This promotion-relegation model has become very popular and has been replicated widely across the football world. The league hierarchy concept has some major benefits for football. Number 1, access for all. Nobody expects to play their first ever game of football in the top league, but there is nothing preventing anyone from forming a team and entering the competition, even if it means they have to start out at the lowest level. Number 2, achievable goals and progression. With a hierarchical league system, there is a league for everyone, whatever their level. All teams are in an environment with achievable goals that they can work towards and improve. And number 3, reduced number of mismatches. In games where one team is overwhelmingly dominant, they can usually rely on repetition of one key strength or tactic, for instance, superior speed or a better ability to head the ball in the box. An inferior opposition will have no strategy to counter this. As a result, nobody on either side learns or develops in these kinds of games. But when clubs are split up into leagues within a hierarchy, they'll usually be playing against near peers. So everyone experiences games where they have opportunities to improve. Access, opportunities to progress, and peer competition all promote participation and effort, which in turn improves football overall. So how does life compare to football's league system? Firstly, around access for all, well, some industries are harder to get into for people who are just starting out compared to those who already have resources and connections. In these industries, assessing a person's performance can be difficult or subjective, or their performance may not actually matter that much because the organization they belong to has comparatively little competition in a lucrative sector. Examples that come to mind are investment banking and screen entertainment. Number 2, achievable immediate goals and progression. Achievable goals can be out of reach for all but the elite in their field. For instance, in industries like music or screen entertainment, the availability and value of opportunities skews strongly toward a relative handful of top performers. And 3, avoidance of mismatches. In business, there is nothing separating those who are in the early stages of growing and developing from the wealthy and powerful, who can often have a mindset of wanting to spawn kill all potential competitors, for instance by tying them up in legal action or threatening consequences for any potential partners and customers of new businesses. So I would say that our culture and systems are currently somewhat lacking in robust, consistent ways for removing barriers to entry, opening up opportunities for all, and preventing incumbents from stifling others. A league hierarchy for business is probably not exactly the right solution for a better economy, but to me, it's worth thinking more on how we can address these problems which put a brake on economic participation and the economy as a whole. Way number 5, this is now. Early football formations had 2 defenders and 5 attackers. Over time, this is completely reversed, and most modern teams now have 4 or 5 defenders. New strategies have kept emerging. First, there was Catenaccio with its heavy emphasis on defence at all costs. Total football arose to counter Catenaccio through a shift from fixed to fluid positions. Total football then developed further into tiki-taka, which emphasizes possession and depriving the opposition of the ball. In response, counter-attacking and gegenpressing, which is trying to confine the opposing team to their half of the field, have developed as new strategies. Football strategies have continued to become ever more sophisticated. The simpler strategies of the past can't be relied on to guarantee success, particularly at the elite level. Most elite teams use a blend of these strategies, and they're always trying to find new ways to gain an advantage. Rules and their enforcement also change, usually for the good of the game. Minimization of injury has been steadily prioritized, and the foul detection has increasingly improved. Whenever rules change, some will be negatively affected and they will complain loudly. But if rule changes promote increased overall participation, then such complaints should not stop rule changes. The level keeps increasing in life as well. The strategies of the past no longer work as well as they used to. The price your parents paid for a house is probably much lower than a comparable property on the market today. This is because there was less demand and the money supply was tighter. The amount people could spend on housing was limited because many of the other expenses of life were higher than they are today. Buyers were generally only in competition with other people in the same town who read the same newspaper, and banks were far more cautious in lending to people. All of this kept a cap on what sellers could ask for. Today, people have more income to dedicate to housing because other costs have shrunk dramatically. Buyers are now competing with potentially the whole world thanks to the internet, and banks are much more willing to lend, maybe even the entire value of a house. All of this increases the price that sellers can demand. These changes are irreversible. A plan to buy a similar size house in the same suburb as your parents may not be viable today. You may complain that this is unfair, and this might attract unhelpful comment from people of your parents' generation who may accuse you of being lazy, profligate, or just plain stupid for not being able to do what they did. I'm not exactly sure how unfair the current situation is. Probably more sophisticated strategies are now needed than our parents used. However, it is clear that property is inelastic and it attracts steady demand because it's a necessity of life. This can make housing appealing as a low-effort wealth asset. I would advocate rule changes to make property less attractive as an investment, with the goal of inhibiting monopoly-seeking tendencies and promoting more dynamic economic activities. This would likely have the effect of reducing property prices. There will be those who complain bitterly, but as with football, the complaints of affected individuals should not prevent rule changes that promote overall participation. Way number 6, them. Manchester City and Manchester United are great football clubs and rivals. A fan of either club could celebrate this rivalry as a grand story that adds incredible richness to their experience as a fan. Or they could foam with hatred at the mere mention of their rival and expend huge energy verbally or even physically attacking opposing fans. Similarly, in life, we belong to some groups and we don't belong to others based on a huge range of factors: nationality, ethnicity, gender, political persuasion, socio-economic grouping, etc. We can accept such differences exist and that they contribute to the rich tapestry of society. Or we can harbor antipathy to those we consider different to us and engage in various forms of conflict with them. It's hard to see how such arbitrary and needless conflict benefits us, either in football or life in general. Summing up, primitive and modern. You may think this analogy is a reach. After all, life is a serious thing and football is just a game. But modern sport encapsulates many of our most important ideas. 1. Taking on challenges and risking failure helps people grow and contribute to society. 2. We achieve more collectively when we agree and abide by fair ways of interacting with others. 3. Amassing and focusing resources is great if they're used for something worthwhile and ambitious, but is not great if they're just being hoarded. 4. And when wealth and power is used to keep others down, it becomes counterproductive. 5. Being open to new ideas and new ways of doing things is critical to our success. That includes being tolerant of other people's ideas and new ways of doing things. 6. Rivals are not the same as enemies, and it's counterproductive to treat them as such. However, in both football and life, there is nothing stopping us from choosing to flout or ignore these principles. 1. We can avoid all challenges because of a fear of failure, and then turn around and mock those who do experience failure. 2. We can decide the rules only apply to other people, and if we can get away with breaking them, we will. 3. We can harbor blind resentment of anyone who amasses wealth. Or conversely, we can kowtow to the wealthy and powerful if we think it will benefit us. 4. We can bully those who are weaker than us and grovel to and enable those who are stronger. 5. We can knee-jerk reject ideas that don't immediately resonate with us just because they don't feel right. And 6. We can focus on ourselves and either ignore the needs of others or actively work against their interests. These are all primitive attitudes that have been passed on to us by our distant ancestors and are optimized for our survival in a small tribe living in an unknown, dangerous world. But they're holding us back from being the best that we can be. So let's try to transcend these primitive impulses so we can all prosper.